Rayman, the video game platforming series that has hosted many a game. You've got Rayman 2, arguably one of the best 3D platformers in history that probably took itself a bit too seriously at times. You've got Rayman 3, one of the most unfunny it's funny games in existence that I would argue is rather underrated.
Sorry guys, just airing the place out.
Comedy.
And then you've got Rayman Origins and Legends, the strong reboots of the series from the early 2010s that for some reason never amounted to any sort of resurgence for the series despite being near flawless games on their own merits. Oh, and you've got the Raving Rabbids. Yeah, we don't talk about those here. Rayman in general is just a funny series, one that never seemed to take the easy, straight and narrow path with its games, one that always felt the need to change things up with each new installment, making for a rather scatterbrained and disconnected series in its early years. But the game that started it all, the original Rayman for various game systems of the mid-1990s, actually took a rather expected path for this particular title. There's no poor attempts at being funny, there's no overarching narrative of Rayman coming of age as he sets out on this epic journey to save the entire universe from the most horrible things imaginable. It's just simple Rayman in a pretty straightforward 2D platformer. But not without its quirks, of course. Rayman 1 does bring an extremely vibrant, fairy tale-like atmosphere to the table, which is what makes it stand out from other various bootleg platformers of the era, and that's why I am here to play it. What's going on, guys? My name is Marky Mark, and I've been covering various video game topics on this channel for about 2 years now. And while in more recent times I've been more known for covering topics pertaining to this guy, I've decided to go back to my roots a little bit. I've decided to talk about the original Rayman series. The Rayman series is something I hold near and dear to my heart. I got started on Rayman as a kid with Rayman 3 Hoodlum Havoc, and then in more recent years I discovered Rayman 2 The Great Escape, which easily tops my list of best platformers ever. And now here we are, coming full circle with the original Rayman. So, what are my thoughts on Rayman 1? What is my opinion, if you will? Well, look, Rayman 1 right off the bat is an extremely high-quality platformer. You simply can't deny the level of innovation with the formula here. You've got Rayman in this hyper-mystical, fairy world setting where he makes his way through various parts of the world in order to free all the captured Electoon creatures and to stop the mysterious Mr. Dark. Most notably is how Rayman incorporates these vibrant fairy tale vibes into each level you progress through. You've got a nice, lush green forest setting, a high-energy, cacophonous music world. You've got an arts and crafts world that brings me back to my kindergarten days. There's absolutely nothing left to the imagination when it comes to the setting of Rayman 1. What I love the most about these worlds is simply how outrageous some of them are, and this is balanced out with more grounded spots like the lush green forest or the Twilight aesthetic canyons. That balance of crazy, out there levels with grounded, realistic levels make for a very believable setting. I'd totally buy that Rayman lives here. And it's not far-fetched to believe there is a developed ecosystem here, despite how absurd parts of it may be. But what about the gameplay itself? What about the nitty-gritty platforming? How does that contribute overall to the final product? Well, to be honest, it's all around some pretty conventional stuff. Rayman starts off with a very bare-bones moveset, really only having the ability to run and jump and not much else. It's only as he progresses through the game does he unlock new moves from Batilla the Fairy, granting him the ability to use his fist to swing from flying rings, the ability to run, and the ability to hang from ledges? Okay, yeah, some of these new abilities you unlock probably didn't need to be something that had to be earned. I mean, hanging from ledges, is that really something worthy of being deemed a power that needs to be unlocked? Anyways, these new abilities will play directly into the platforming challenges that await you. You'll be swinging from flying rings to scale bottomless pits, you'll be using your fists to remove enemies from some tight spots that are needed to progress through. You'll also just be doing some pretty basic jumping from one platform to another, perhaps while dodging obstacles or enemies along the way. You might even find yourself in a bit of a jam as you attempt to climb upwards as fast as you can while a pool of water or lava rises above you. At some points, you may just find yourself using your trusty helicopter hair in order to cut a large rope that's holding up a huge boulder that is blocking your path. And who knows, you might just discover a flying ring just off screen where you can use your fist to swing from, sending you to a completely offshoot area of the level where you bob and weave your way around various enemies and obstacles in order to break open one of the many cages containing the captured Electoons. That's only a handful of the types of scenarios you encounter in Rayman, because while Rayman's base moveset is a tad underwhelming in hindsight, there's an insane variety of intense platforming sections that utilize his limited moves very well. It's almost like lead developer and creator of Rayman, Michel Ancel, decided he wanted to do a lot with a little, and that he did. I really appreciate these sections in Bandland where you have these trumpet guys playing themselves while sending you flying the opposite way, and you more or less just have to tap the jump button at the right moment to make it through this whole gauntlet. It's a very simple platforming section that feels more complex than it actually is in the moment. And man, the boss fights. I really can respect some of these boss fights. They have that classic boss fight vibe where you're dodging a set string of attacks while waiting for an obvious opening in the boss to make your attack, except with these bosses, there is no obvious opening. The animation style of these bosses make it so that there's never an obvious moment of, oh, the boss is temporarily in this vulnerable position where you can attack them. That was always a big thing I found annoying about boss fights in games. There's always these moments where the boss takes the time to either taunt you or just act stupid in some way, conveniently leaving itself open for an easy hit from you. But Rayman bosses don't do that, and because of that, it's never quite obvious how you're supposed to beat them. It's all just about trying different things until something finally works. I could go on and on, but the fact is, if I did, we'd be here all night, because Rayman 1 is easily one of the best platformers of its era, with so many different things to love about it. I mean, it's more or less every platformer fan's dream, and it's no slouch in the difficulty department either. In fact, Rayman 1 is considered by many to be one of the hardest platformers ever. Just do a little Googling right now, and I guarantee you will find multiple top 10 lists of the hardest PS1 games ever, with Rayman 1 sitting at the very top. But what exactly makes Rayman such a hard game for many? Well, it's a combination of a lot of little things. A major contributor would have to be the stilted controls. Rayman's movement just feels awkward. And even though the running ability grants you some extra momentum when you need to make larger jumps, it still doesn't feel like there's very much oomph behind the jump. It also doesn't help that the platforming here is extremely tight. Starting at around the second set of levels, oddly enough, Rayman 1 will immediately spike in difficulty and start asking you to be way more precise with your movements. There is no room for error in many of these platforming sections. I mean, you'll find yourself sliding along an extremely slippery set of paths that are stupidly sensitive to the littlest of movements, making it very easy to mess up a jump. You'll also have to contend with enemies, either charging you or shooting projectiles at you while you jump through some tight gauntlets. You also have to bear in mind that your helicopter hair ability is, in fact, a double-edged sword, because while it does give you an extra couple seconds to float in the air while you time a jump, the slowness of it can leave you extremely vulnerable to mid-air attacks. There will be various objects blocking your path, usually of the pointy, sharp variety, that you have to either dodge or somehow remove from your path. And oftentimes when you do remove these objects by force, it doesn't always work out the way you want it to. Enemies and objects will also just randomly manifest themselves at any point in the level, making your life that much harder. Yep, they will literally just appear there, with zero warning. Sometimes it's a lava rock rolling down a hill toward you. Sometimes it's a convenient platform you need to progress. It could be any number of obstacles you could imagine, but what matters above all is shit just appears places. Sometimes the fate of Rayman is simply determined at the whim of the game's code, which can make for a frustrating experience. What do you think? Is it cheap on the developer's part to just have important collectibles spawn out of thin air just off screen right as you're exiting an area? Or what about when enemies just show up nearly right on top of you at any moment? It's almost like this game at times is just you playing against an AI that's in God mode, who can spawn any of the game's assets anywhere on the map anytime they want to. You know what? That's actually not a bad analogy to describe Rayman 1, because ladies and gentlemen, Rayman 1 is one of the most unforgiving, sadist, sociopathic platformers in history. I've only listed off a few of the reasons why this game is that difficult. I could go on and on about this to further support my case, but if I did, I would just be preaching to the choir. Everybody already knows how hard this game is, so all I can really do is ask now whether or not this hurts the game's overall quality. Listen, I'm gonna put this as simply as I can. When Rayman 1 isn't being brutally hard, I'm having fun with it. When it is being totally unfair and stupidly difficult, I'm not having fun with it. I want to come right out and solidify my opinion on Rayman 1. I really like this game. I respect the hell out of it. It's an amazing time through and through, if you were to minus out all the insane difficulty curve stuff. And that fact is insanely tragic in hindsight, because aside from the difficulty, you have a flawless masterpiece underneath that. The primary reason for Rayman 1 being so brutal is due to its apparent lack of playtesting during development. Yep, the devs apparently never bothered to sit down and make sure firsthand that this lightning in a bottle that they had caught was actually playable, whether it be to time constraints or sheer inexperience on their end. Due to that minuscule, insignificant fun fact, we are left with the blueprint for a perfect platformer that is depressingly held back by its completely inaccessible difficulty. You know, life really is just pain, isn't it? And while I could easily myself just go back in time and tell Michel Ancel, hey, you better playtest the shit out of this game or else, or I could just as swiftly jump to a different reality where they actually bothered to balance out Rayman 1. That's just something I can do anytime I want, not a big deal or anything. I've decided for one specific reason only, to stick around in this universe. And that is for one cute little fan project that just so happens to exist. Rayman Redemption. Anybody? Rayman Redemption, a remake of the original Rayman 1, complete with Rayman's full moveset available from the moment you pick up the controller. That includes hanging from ledges, running, and the helicopter hair. A completely rebalanced difficulty curve, made way more fair to players, but not completely neutered by modern constructs. Better graphics, a better frame rate, smoother, quicker gameplay, mechanically, without flaw, Rayman Redemption is a nearly perfect alternative to Rayman 1 in every way. And the craziest part? This was all done by a fan, a human being that loved Rayman 1 to death, but saw just how ridiculous that difficulty was, and decided to friggin' do something about it. And not only did he do something about it, he made it so that nobody could outdo him in making the definitive Rayman 1 experience, because not only did he rebalance the game to make it playable, not only did he improve every aspect of the game including graphics, movement, level design, no, he went ahead and added literal dozens of new levels to the main campaign. These include more levels where you get to fly around on your pet mosquito slave, solid bonus levels that can be unlocked by collecting special coins in the main game, and an entirely new world centered around a child's toy box that definitely wasn't made to subtly nostalgia me back to my kindergarten days. The best part above all about Rayman Redemption? It doesn't force you to go back and 100% the game before you are allowed to face the final boss. Because that's literally what Rayman 1 wanted you to do. It wanted you to go back and face every one of these brutal levels that you definitely wanted nothing to do with up to that point, and relive the trauma over and over until you freed every last cage of Electoons. Listen, Chief, this ain't it. Rayman Redemption turns such a big negative into a positive, however, by giving you more incentive to break the Electoon cages for your own benefit rather than for the devs' entertainment. For every certain amount of Electoon cages you break, you can cash that number in with Batilla the Fairy, who will then, in turn, grant you a higher health bar. It's a win-win situation that we've got going on here, baby. The player benefits from this because obviously they get more health and in turn a more powerful Rayman the more Electoons they find, and the game developers score the W because they are incentivizing the player to play more of their game and to actually want to 100% the game at the promise of more health. That right there is what you call, in scientific terms, a mutual relationship. The original Rayman 1, however, that was just plain parasitic. A common complaint I hear about Rayman Redemption is that it's too easy of a game by comparison to the original, that the stink of modern game design is too strong here, making it so that many of the more memorable, hardcore platforming sections and boss fights have been smoothed over much to the point where they are too streamlined. I would have to disagree with that. While the earlier stages are noticeably easier by comparison to their aged counterpart, this is acceptable because they are the earlier stages. I can't begin to tell you how jarring it was when I made it to Bandland, the second world in-game, and suddenly found myself dealing with a significant difficulty spike that almost made me want to quit playing altogether, if I'm being honest. A difficulty curve should be consistent throughout a game, not one that lures you into a false sense of security in World 1 and then just pulls the rug out from underneath you in World 2 onwards. Rayman Redemption takes attentive care to its difficulty, making the game more accessible but still playable in its first half, and then gradually building to a challenging but fair second half. Perhaps this might come off as boring or unmemorable to Rayman purists, but to any average video gamer, this will just come off as a fun time, because that's what it's all about, just having fun. Okay, so after giving a little bit of praise to Rayman Redemption over Rayman 1, I'm starting to preemptively detect a little bit of dissension amongst the Rayman audience, a little bit of a divide, if you will. Listen, we are lucky enough as gamers to be living in a timeline where two versions of a classic game exist. One to serve both sides of the coin. You got the Rayman purists on one hand, who will get the old Rayman and that old brutal difficulty that they love so very much, and then you got possibly younger, modern audiences who may not prefer the archaic design style of the old Rayman game, but can still enjoy the game in a more balanced fashion. The way I look at it, everybody wins. So stop freaking out and just enjoy Rayman. And I think if we can learn to coexist peacefully in that regard, I think we might actually have a chance as a species. When it comes to my personal opinion, I prefer Rayman Redemption over the original. I see the original as a great game with a lot of untapped potential that is held back by its dominating difficulty. I simply can't enjoy all that Rayman 1 has to offer when I'm so busy dealing with one singular component of the game in its insane challenge, a challenge that is so insane to me that it completely overshadows the impeccable level design, the entrancing art style, the charismatic characters, and the overall fun that undoubtedly exists underneath. Rayman Redemption to me represents that untapped potential being fully realized with the added convenience of modern game design. And while Redemption does tend to overdo it at times with maybe a bit too much added content, hey, I get it, a fan made this, they obviously had a lot of fun making it, I still think the base game shines through as raw Rayman fun, wholly developed into its final form. But wait, if I'm sitting here calling the original Rayman 1 too difficult to the point that it's unplayable, then why do I still consider it a masterpiece? Because, you sillies, Rayman Redemption proved Rayman 1 is a masterpiece. It's a masterpiece hiding underneath a very hard game, one that can still be fully experienced depending on your level of tolerance. And that right there is a very beautiful thing. Like I said, at the end of the day, just enjoy the games you like, play what you want to play, it doesn't matter. And let's just enjoy Rayman for what he is, because if Ubisoft's obvious opinion on the franchise is anything to go by, it's not like we're going to be getting much else. But yeah, thanks for watching, guys. I'm Marky Mark, I'm out. Link in the description to Rayman Redemption. Thank you to the creator who decided to make this wonderful masterpiece. Go check the game out for yourself, give the dude some credit. He's amazing. Yeah, and that's the Rayman trilogy right there. It's very exciting to be able to complete the entire thing after 2 years. Yeah, more stuff to come. If you like what you like to see here, if you like what you saw here, please give the channel a subscription. Yeah, sending the magazine in the mail to you. Oh, jeez. Yeah. Thanks for watching. See you guys next time.